Hello and welcome to Idea to IPO. I'm Jason Putnam-Gordon, an emerging growth and venture capital attorney with K&L Gates LLP. K&L Gates is a full-service, fully integrated law firm with nearly 2,000 attorneys and 50 different offices on 5 different continents. I'm in the emerging growth and venture capital group, so that means I work with companies from formation through their exits, and I work with investors as they deploy capital into those companies. Today's topic is very exciting. It's investments and innovation in energy and climate tech. We have a fantastic panel who I'll let introduce themselves in a moment, but they are Camila Orozco-Gil, who's an investment manager at Symbia VC, Gabriel Van Leusen, who's a senior associate at Powerhouse Ventures, Zoe Samuel, who's a venture partner at Starshot Capital, and Ephraim Lindenbaum, who's the managing director at Advanced Ventures. Before we get started, I want to let the audience know how today's panel will run. We'll have a panel discussion for approximately an hour, which is until about 1 o'clock Pacific time, at which point we will take questions from the audience. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll take questions during that period of time that have general applicability, which are going to apply to most folks. Now, again, today's event is live and recorded, so please don't share any confidential information. Now is not the appropriate venue for that. Additionally, I'm also running the tech in the background, so if you see me looking away or get drawn into something, it's not because the panelists aren't interesting. It's probably because I'm trying to keep the show running. And in line with that, I will not be monitoring the chat. So again, if you've got questions, please use the Q&A function. With that in mind, I'm going to make one more plug to get the audience poll filled out because we'd love to know who's here live, although we know that people will be watching on a time-shifted basis, and we're thankful for your attendance as well. And I'll start by maybe having Camila introduce herself, talk a little bit about Symbia and where they play in the space.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Camila. I'm originally from Colombia, but I was living in the EU for the past 6 years, specifically in Germany and Holland. And so right now I'm working for a climate tech venture capital called Symbia VC, which is from a parent company that exports timber, lumber, wood, however you call it, and is a major player in the construction industry. And what they wanted to do is use their expertise to help climate tech founders with different value propositions and within their value chain. So anywhere from material sciences to logistics to doing any profitable business model, we're part of it. My main goal is to get more involved in the energy infrastructure side and the material science side. And so I'm here all the way from Germany. I just arrived 2 months ago to the Bay Area, and I'm very happy to meet some American founders overall from all over the continent and help them out.
Wonderful. We're delighted to have you here, Camila. And I'm sorry, the stage at which Powerhouse is focused, are you throughout company's life cycle? Or are you focused more on the early, or where are you?
Early stage. So we focus on early stage. We would say the requirements mainly is to have IP and have full people working on it. And since it's mainly hardware, I would say it's more like a Series A. It's our sweet spot. So we write tickets from 300K up to 3 million as a first-time fund. And then we plan on following on investments up until Series C or so.
Fantastic. Again, we're delighted to have you here. Gabriel, tell us a little bit about yourself, please. Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's great to be here today. Gabriel Van Leusen, I started my career at Bosch, so spent some time in Germany, but much longer ago than Camila did. Went to grad school, focused on renewable energy project finance, studying law and business, and then discovered venture through a student fund during that time. Spent a year at thesis, their UK-based sustainability consulting firm, on their ventures team, and then came over to Powerhouse Ventures a little over a year ago. Time's definitely flown. But Powerhouse Ventures, is helpful to think of us as 2 separate but affiliated organizations. Powerhouse is a boutique innovation consulting firm. They work with large corporates like Google and DNV and Enel and help them understand and interface with various niches around the energy mobility, decarbonization, innovation ecosystem. I sit on the venture side. Our mission is to back founding teams that are building innovative software to rapidly decarbonize the energy and mobility systems. We focus on seed stage software companies that are decarbonizing, democratizing, and digitizing energy mobility industries. And we have an emphasis on finance and deployment, asset management and optimization, and enabling market access and participation. We do also go as early as pre-seed, but we generally invest in the seed stage. We're backed by primarily large corporates in the industries that we're active in. So folks like Total, Toyota. We also have financial investors like Energy Impact Partners, Fifth Wall, UBS, Microsoft on the software side. Then we also have some family offices, folks like Builders Vision, Walton Family, as well as lots of individuals who are leaders around the energy mobility industries, folks like Lynn Jurek, founder of Sunrun, Howard Wenger, president of Nextracker. And we raised our last fund in March of last year. It's a $75 million fund. We write checks anywhere from a couple $100,000 to a couple million. We're comfortable leading, co-leading, following. We've led a majority of the deals out of our second fund, and we do follow on through Series A.
Well, fantastic. We're delighted to have you here. Great to meet you today. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself in advance?
Yeah, thank you. Great to join a panel with some amazing colleagues here. Ephraim Lindenbaum, Managing Director of Advanced Ventures, based here in Silicon Valley. I am a recovering entrepreneur here in Silicon Valley myself. So been through the cycles, had the exit, became a VC, kind of standard Valley practice. We've been investing since 1999 across the technology, mobility, and more importantly, sustainability category that we're talking about today. We've been doing it so long, they used to call it sustainability before the word climate became cool. Today, we very much invest across technology, health, and wellness. We consider this category very much the health and wellness and well-being of the planet type component. We typically invest in the earlier stages of a company's development, what would be historically thought of as a late seed. Today, it's probably a little more aligned to a Series A model. We do look for companies that have a fairly well-formed initial team, early product and market, and either client feedback at a beta or customer level. We typically write checks from $500,000 to $3 million in our first wave with the company, and we'll carry on through the next 2 or 3 rounds of financing as a follow-on investor. We broadly look at the space as not only being meaningful from a impact side, but also for financial side. We really look to find companies that have the ability to scale and compete on levels with traditional venture investments, and that tends to be a large part of our focus and thesis.
Well, we're delighted to have you back, F. Always a pleasure. And last but certainly not least, Zoe, would you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and Starshot Capital?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yep, I'm with Starshot Capital and formerly from Google. And before that, I was in showbiz, and turns out fully transferable skill set. If you can get actors to show up in the same place at the same time, you can get Googlers to do it, and then founders. They're weirdly similar. So Starshot Capital is primarily focused on 3 verticals within climate. So the built environment, industrial sector, and food, land, and ag. Land use and agriculture, and we're interested in pre-seed, seed, and Series A companies, and we're particularly looking, for folks that, are going to move serious tons of greenhouse gases, but also are serious businesses without the climate component being considered. So even if climate change, God willing, we all woke up tomorrow and Santa Claus has come early and really delivered. These would still be great businesses. So thank you. Oh, and our typical check size is $500,000 with follow-on capital as appropriate. And we also have a lot of obviously co-investments and all that.
Perfect. Well, welcome back. So let's go over who's in the room real quick before we open up. So I'm going to end the poll at this point and share the results. We've got about a third of the folks from the Bay Area. We have a sort of Bay Area heavy panel today. Where we've got, I think, the 4 of us and one person in Gabriel, who's in Michigan. We've got 10% from California, another 30% from the US, and mostly North America. And then a few folks from Europe and Australia. That's not unusual. We understand that this is being recorded and that folks will be watching it on a time-shifted basis from elsewhere in the world. So we're delighted to have you here. Sorry you're not live with us, but glad that you're attending. And then in terms of the population in the room, We've got 35% first-time entrepreneurs, 20% serial entrepreneurs. We've got a few folks that 20% that are early stage companies, got some growth stage companies, 10%, and then 10% of the folks from academia. And then we've got a few angels and a few venture investors and some folks who don't meet any of those categories. So delighted to have you all with us today. Let's shift. This is actually my first panel. I think I mentioned this before, in about 3 months. So delighted to be back. Like to talk a little bit about market conditions, maybe generally as with respect to venture, and then of course really drill into climate and energy and sort of see what we've seen. I think the last time I moderated a panel was May. Venture had slowed down in general significantly. There was some drop off in climate and energy a little bit, but it was sort of weathering the storm relatively well. I feel like in sort of my experience, things actually, contrary to what I thought they ticked up a little bit in the summer, and I think that they appear to be kind of coming back pretty strong once we hit the fall. And I say contrary to what I anticipate is because usually the summer is sort of like a little bit of a slowdown period. And so you'd think if the spring was slow, the summer would be even slower. But tell me a little bit about what you've been seeing. Open question. Everyone wants to jump in first.
So from my perspective, actually, there's a lot of picking up from early stage companies. I have seen a lot of the founders have realized that they want to raise a fund before winter, despite like the economic conditions. However, I have seen quite the opposite for later stage companies that are struggling to get second Series B or a Series A even in their pipeline, considering the socioeconomic situation and everything. So they're trying to postpone and kind of like prolong the cash burn of the previous round in order to prove their investors that they're reasonable and that they are on for the long haul. But I think it's a great time to also tackle challenges in a different way. Not, I think at the same time in 2021, for instance, we had a lot of high valuations that were not very smart if we see them from now, from today's perspective. So I think it's a lot of good learnings we can learn within this period of time.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that perspective. I think looking back towards the beginning part of the year, and throughout the year, we've seen similar amounts of companies throughout the stages in our pipeline this year. Although we have made a few less investments than we had over the period of last year. I think that tracks a bit with what folks like CTVC are saying around 40% reduction in funding in Q1 for instance of this year. I think definitely echoing though what Camila mentioned, things were fairly busy over the summer, and then after Labor Day coming back, the last couple of weeks for me has been as busy as any time that I've been in Powerhouse Venture. So it definitely seems like folks at the pre-seed and seed stages in software are out fundraising, and VCs are active. Definitely echo that the Series A and B still seem to be tough raises. We've seen some larger later stage deals recently, but there's a lot of dry powder. Again, shout out to CTVC for some great data on this, but I think they're saying over 30 billion or so of kind of dry powder and dedicated climate funds at the moment. And I think there's a lot of folks, that have capital to deploy and are sensing out the macro trends. But at the early stages we're at, it's definitely busy.
I agree with that. I will say that I'm seeing a few businesses that darlings of various stages, that if they've got the hype and they can justify the hype, it's still all happening, and there's people showing up to throw money at them, and it's competitive bids coming in. So there certainly are those superstars out there who are just, everyone's like, if you smell of unicorn, they're still coming at you. And yeah, it's definitely, I was like, oh, it's summer, I'll just mosey off to see my cousins in Scotland and nothing will be happening, and then I won't be taking calls from the mountain. Oh, whoops. That was so yeah, it's definitely very buzzy. I will also say that in the wider economic environment, it seems like people have got a bit less hysterical. And so those of us who were saying this whole time, and if I remember you were one of them, stay the course and don't freak out, so far have touch wood, have been right. and I think also there's certain things like the IRA's critical mass, of things moving, has like the longer that bill is in place, the more things become the more people get a sense of, oh, this is how we're doing business now. And so I think that, and people get a little bit better at operating in a new regime, because even if it's better, it still takes some adapting. And so, as time goes on, that's certainly advantageous. But on the other hand, there's also things like big wobbles happening in China, with Country Garden and stuff like that. So there's these and then the geopolitics of Ukraine, there's stuff out there that gives people good reason to be nervous, but it's nervous rather than oh, the sky is falling.
Yeah, certainly, and I really echo all the things my colleague said. Our general internal prediction was by end of Q2, beginning of Q3, the thaw would start to occur. I mean, I think we saw that happen. Additionally, I think there's been a new dynamic that's entered the equation. As VCs pulled back over the last 12 to 18 months, family offices, especially in this category with their own direct mandates and lots of capital, have started to really step in. And I think one aspect that we've seen is, VCs, especially bulge bracket large funds that, felt that their pullback, valuation squeeze, and then return would sort of, be perceived as the market waking back up, are quickly realizing that there are a lot of highly committed individuals, family offices out there that to a large degree picked up a lot of their slack. And I think that's going to make for a very unique go forward model here come Q3, end of Q3, Q4. And I think it's going to get even more heated in Q1, Q2 of next year. I mean, to the point, there's a tremendous amount of capital on the sidelines. Most of the large and even small funds, topped off the tank, were formed, raised their capital, coming into this, Ukraine-based downturn over the last, 12, 18 months. And, what was, I think, sort of put off to the side during this last period is, fund cycle times. And I think as, the funds went off to do their offsites early this summer, as people sat at their, beach houses, they realized that the amount of time they had to get this capital to work, to get a meaningful exit, to be able to raise the next fund is rapidly ticking. And I think that's very beneficial for founders. My belief is great deals rise to the top, and, the solid ones are going to get funded anytime. I think there's been a little bit of a return to, reasonableness in terms of valuations. I think we've seen some high flyers out there like Modvion realize they, may not have made the right strategic decisions. And I would hate to be, in a founder seat that raised money at a nosebleed level and may have to go back and talk to people after that without massive success. So I think there are a lot of good things that have happened, and I think there's a lot of surprising things that have happened. And in my opinion, those are all playing well for the entrepreneur.
There's also the fact that this summer was terrifying to a lot of people. Like, New York finally had its moment of, oh, this is happening to us too. And with the wildfire smoke. And my brother sent me a picture where he was with his wife and kids in Sicily, or Rhodes rather. And he sent me a picture where, from inside his car, where there's wildfire smoke over here, there's a volcano over there, which, isn't necessarily, obviously not a climate change thing, although it could cause some. And then on the dashboard, it says 47 Celsius outside, which is like 1,000 billion degrees. It's certainly at least 10 or 12 Celsius higher than it should be where he was. And so I had like people who thought of climate change as something that happens to those other people in the future, some place far away, are suddenly like, oh, my holiday was ruined. I had to go to a wedding in a 3-piece suit and melt all day. And that they're pretty upset about it. So public opinion is that people got a shock. I suspect they'll probably have forgotten about it by Christmas, but for now they're paying attention.
I mean, I don't know about that, Zoe. I mean, just from my own personal experience, when we obviously started getting some wildfires and started remembering the smoke around 2018. But in 2020, I was living in San Francisco, and we had that day where it just never got light. And it really hit home. I had a call with a client who was in New York, and like I could see, it was a video call, so I could see out the window, and it was like the same thing. I was like, this is like terrible. So That got seared in my mind, no pun intended. But you mentioned earlier the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. It's now been a year or so, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars have been starting to be deployed either directly or indirectly in sort of tax credits and loans and other things. What are we seeing? What are you all seeing sort of shaking out of that in terms of verticals, whether it's in hydrogen or even in nuclear? What kinds of things are you starting to see in terms of technology and innovation?
So I think it's a great question. I think the timing around the IRA is really interesting and also heavily related to the conversation we're just having around the uptick in the market. I think top line, last August, seeing all of these, uncapped benefits from the federal government is exciting, but you really need regulations to implement them to get to a level of granularity that you're going to be able to make investment decisions on, and that takes time. For transferable tax credits, for instance, it's just in July that Treasury came out with more detailed guidance. Still waiting for some details around hydrogen, and even after the rulemaking process, folks are going to be litigating around the details of the rule that create some uncertainty from an investment perspective as well too. So I think tons of excitement last summer around the IRA. I think it's actually starting to get to the point where folks are, getting some certainty that's allowing for more capital to kind of follow, the categories that the IRA, has been defining. And I think, big winners, continuation and expansion of the ITC and PTC, renewable power generation, I think is huge. I think, still, I think there's been a lot of announcements around hydrogen, but I think just with clarification still needed around the kind of carbon intensity, how you're going to be measuring that and all of that. I haven't seen as much actual capital being deployed towards projects. Like some's happening, but I think it's a pretty small share of the kind of high-level announcements that are happening there. I think seeing a lot around, direct air capture with, the carbon oxides, 45Q, and CDR more broadly, I think is another area that, hearing a lot of investor interest related to the IRA, but sure there's a lot of others that folks would like to hit on as well.
Yes, I think, for instance, from my side, like European perspective side, since I was fairly recently there in that market, I think the pressure from the LPs, like that these big public companies are not as profitable as before, and their investments that they had it safe are not as safe anymore in fossil fuels in this type of traditional companies has been shifted. And so LPs, or like the investors of our funds, are interested on companies that replace those former companies that they were used to invest in. So I think there's a lot of interest, kind of like from high management for us at least, to invest on energy infrastructure a lot, especially in Europe. So right now with the Ukrainian-Russian conflict and other kind of like socioeconomic situations in the EU, there's a lot of interest of founders that can tackle this problem in an efficient manner and can also comply with different regulations that the EU has also put in place towards sustainability.
Yeah, you couldn't, I mean, I agree that in Europe, it's definitely like it's now cool to be green because it's sticking it to Putin. That, that's very, very fashionable. It's certainly the British, they're so excited that they can make movies with a Russian villain again, which is, I hope Russians themselves in the UK are not getting too much stick. But it's certainly heat pumps, I think, is the area I'm seeing. Everybody's mad about heat pumps. Which is great because we've got a very nice we're very interested in that space. But yeah, you can't swing a cat in the UK press now without hitting a headline about heat pumps. And here in California, obviously everyone's mad about them. And my AC system just went out, and so this house is going to have a heat pump soon, which is very exciting. So yeah, I think that's an area that a stupendous amount of money is going into. And one of the things I really like about it is with my own personal experience, where we had a guy come over and give us a quote, is that like, this was the exact same guy who a couple of years ago would come over and give you a quote for just a new AC system. And, he's a blue collar guy, and seems to have seamlessly switched into selling people heat pumps. And, now he's clear. I had a nice chat with him about it. And now he's clear on like, what's the next X years of his career going to look like, and that this is the new thing. And he learned how to do it. So that was really exciting to see, because obviously you see sort of all these headlines about Bidenomics and all these new, blue collar jobs, and you sort of hope that it's true. And so it was nice to actually see one, live and in person.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, Europe definitely has had a bit of a reckoning. Certainly there's the weather. I'm not sure that's moving the needle as much as we love there. But I think the Ukraine conflict, Russian gas, all of these issues, has really galvanized Europe. The Europeans have been at this for a while. We all forgot about it in the U.S. As I joke, we're at clean tech 2.0. The Europeans have been just, doing clean tech ever since. So, it is coming back to the U.S. I think what we're gladly seeing now is just the general adoption curve moving at a fairly regular pace, which is lovely. The areas that I think we find super interesting right now are, areas, for example, like the work truck market. People don't think about it. There are, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 work trucks, which are putting out a ton of emissions, for example. They sit there and run with either a generator or their engines for hours on end, sitting in front of homes. For example, certainly, mobile things like food trucks, for example, the ice cream truck, if you have children that they're buying ice cream from. In fact, the city of New York has just, is going to ban ice cream trucks because of those generators. There's a street vendor project there. There are 11,000 street vendors in Manhattan that are using essentially some form of generator right out in front of everybody's house, right? And I think it's things like this that the average consumer and business person is really waking up to. And I think the second piece, which is sort of an unintended consequence of the current, high gas prices, is the ROI factor, and the ability to get the ROIs from the, historic, 5, 7, 10-year payback lines now into the sub-3 numbers. One particular case with a particular company, Jewel Case, for example, ours, they have a 14-month payback for an ice cream truck operator, right? So if you're thinking of upgrading, and with the price of gas today, your ROI is under 14 months. I mean, that is an easy sell, especially when the government is coming after you, and you get all the great marketing. Pet grooming. Who would have thought, right? 10,000 pet groomers that come to your house and, bathe Fido. Well, Fido doesn't like the noise. Fido doesn't like the emissions, and the planet doesn't either. So let's find ways to fix it.
And also, we're going to need a lot more ice cream as the planet gets hotter. So,
hey, that was my perspective. Exactly. One can never go wrong with ice cream.
Virtuous cycle.
But Gabriel, earlier you mentioned, though, it seemed like it's easier with the IRA. Now that we're a year out from the IRA being put in place, and regulations are beginning to get promulgated, it's sort of easier to get comfortable with understanding how that capital is going to get deployed and used efficiently. I mean, the last couple of months, I spoke with some other folks who are in the sector, and they sort of said, well, one issue with government funding sometimes is you don't know when it's going to dry up. You get a grant, but it takes a while for it to come in. Are your portfolio companies able to sort of manage and weather that at this point? Or is the fact that, dealing with the government and the bureaucracy still kind of difficult for you to get comfortable to make those investments?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Where we're sitting from the software side, there's not as many of our portfolio companies that are directly working with the benefits coming out from the IRA, given that most of those are kind of going towards atoms versus bits. But I think broadly, there's definitely going to be some learning curves around accessing the funding. So we're seeing on the software side a lot of folks that are developing incentive engines and developing grant application tools that folks can more easily apply to and access these types of programs. I think to the duration, though, I think one of the things that's key of that point, I think a lot of folks might be hesitant to go after a program where there's a likelihood of it phasing down in a year or two. I think right now having the timeline to the 2030s is huge, and then looking where a majority in the investment that's going in to date from IRA is in districts that are red. And so I think folks have some concern about in 2024 if balance of power in Washington shifts, is it going to be Obamacare 2.0 with everything becoming a pullback and attempt to repeal some of these things. But if you look where the dollars are flowing, I think that makes it pretty tough for a lot of folks at the national level that might want to use it as a wedge issue, and they're bringing jobs to their constituents using funds coming from the federal program. So I think that's another dynamic that's kind of helpful to know. It's hard to read the tea leaves of what's going to happen, post 2024. But I think that, structurally and looking at the financial flows, that, there's a strong, case that it's going to be a lot harder to push on than, it was for Obamacare, for instance.
Yeah, it's weirdly easy to vote against the investment and then still go to the opening of the factories. But if you're then the guy who was responsible for the closing of the factories, you're not getting your job back again.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we really look at areas like, for example, proteins, animals, and being able to go to plant-based proteins. In our case, we've got companies that are doing, all kinds of, unique plant-based proteins. They're now into brands. They're now widely distributed. We've got ones that are using mycelia-based for, really amino acid-rich replacements of red meats, for example. Taking cows out of the equation does as much or more than pretty much most of the other climate-related elements that we can really attack there, or even just reducing it to a large degree. So, I mean, I think this is, kind of fighting the problem across a very broad front, right? So, and I think all my colleagues here are playing it across all of these different categories. And I think that this is what's unique and beautiful about this scenario right now is you have a broad base of funds attacking this. You've got family offices on top of it attacking this. There's a lot of debt finance. There's government finance. There's panic finance in Europe. So there's, this is a great time as a founder to be in this category. There have definitely been years in the last 20 odd years I've been an investor that, it was about as sad as it could be for, a climate now or prior sustainable, entrepreneur out there. And this is the best time. I mean, there are ways to find capital. I mean, we've even had companies, successfully raise in crowdfunding in this category. So, I mean, I think it's, there's a lot of it out there, and, entrepreneurs just have to get their messaging right, get it out in the street, and really, be able to go out and move the needle quickly.
Only because you mentioned crowdfunding. I'm sure there are a lot of folks who are interested in crowdfunding who are listening. I mean, do you see, in my experience, there are companies that go on to be venture backed that have raised crowdfunding, but they're not the majority. I would say they're probably the vast minority. Many times they're sort of consumer focused, right? Because the crowdfunding sort of, and there's of course two different kinds. There's crowd equity funding, and then there's sort of like crowdfunding where you basically pre-sell products. Okay. Yeah. Does anyone have any further comments or thoughts on that? I'm always interested in getting panelists' input on crowdfunding when it comes up, because I get asked about crowdfunding all the time.
Okay. Well, I was the Eeyore. I just let you know, I was the Eeyore of crowdfunding. There was no good thing about crowdfunding that ever existed until I saw an effective entrepreneur go out, raise 2 million plus in crowd equity funding that ticked up in valuations over time there as they got more and more interest. And then in turn, amongst those, effectively work those, investors to find all kinds of pearls of value. This particular company ended up finding a former executive vice president of United Rentals while they were in negotiation with United Rentals that was able to, further build a very personal, C-level relationship with that company. They also had, former military people that, when they saw a problem, in the Ukrainian war, was able to quickly call up this company and say, hey, I wrote you a $25,000 check, and now I'm bringing you up to $25 million in business. And it's very different when you're working, in that perspective. So, I think it's all about the entrepreneur. It's all about the offering. It's how effective they can be. There's so many great tools out there, from HubSpot to this, to that, to the other, in communication and effectiveness. And, if you're really good at using all the tools, you can really turn it into something great. If you're not, be wary.
Yeah, if you're not, don't touch it. Like it's you really have to be the kind of person who you want as a founder to be hyper visible, and you tell a good story, and you make an amazing video, and you hopefully have a product that's like, everybody remembers solar freaking roadways. I don't even know if the product was any good, but the video was amazing. And everyone got really excited about that. Like, I think it's unlikely that you'd be like, we have a new kind of recycled asphalt, and here's a really exciting video about that. But, if you've got a good creative team, again, coming from showbiz, it really is, crowdfunding is an audience building thing as much as it is a money raising thing. And so, as you say, it's generally speaking for companies that are selling direct to consumer. If you are not good at that. If you're really, you know, dealing with some sort of quite arcane thing that's behind the scenes and you're moving, you know, bits, not atoms, then it's probably not going to be for you. It's also, there's a U shape to it. So over the period that you're doing it, like everyone's excited at the beginning, and then you get into this doldrum, and then everybody comes in before your deadline, and it's very hard to keep going in that bit where sort of people. So you have to kind of know that you're right for it, and also like get someone, make sure there's at least someone on your team who's done it, or you're working with someone who's done it many times successfully, because there is an alchemy to it.
I think the consumer facing points made resonate. You know, where we sit, we're primarily B2B focused, and so I think we don't see a lot of crowdfunding. I think when we do, we have some skepticism of, you know, why wasn't you know, this funded, you know, through kind of venture avenue that we typically see in the B2B space. So I think it is atypical in B2B and something that's viewed with, you know, some skepticism whether or not that's fair. I think I hear, you know, F's point on if you can build out a strong network, you know, through that fundraise and you can leverage it. You know, I think that you know, I can see the value there, but where we sit, you know, generally view it more skeptically.
Camila, you need to unmute. Camila, there you go.
Sorry. From a hardware investment perspective, I think also crowdfunding is not the way, as generally speaking, as you may have seen in different financial magazines and so on. However, what we see a lot is like a different type of crowdfunding, which is not a public crowdfunding, but you see a lot of clients or potential clients on investing into high capex companies. So for instance, if someone is building a machine and it's going to take around 5 years on the research and development, and it has a lot of high capex, they kind of like promise the licensing for the machine to this particular client, and yeah, that's the type of alliances we see that could be considered as crowdfunding, but they're not really.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll view it. You know, I probably sounded like Gabriel times 10, and you've probably been on a Zoom with.
Oh, I think we have a recording somewhere.
I was just about to say, I'm sure Rob is like quickly like flipping through the YouTube to CNN me here.
Fortunately, you have so many videos. Hey man,
that I would have died on a pike for you know, no crowdfunding. But you know, I think this goes back to my family office point, and I think this is really interesting for us on the venture side to really understand. You know, we have to be very careful that we're not disintermediated. And, you know, as the people who have basically funded every disintermediation that has happened since, you know, more or less the beginning of technology, right? I think we need to, you know, again, I'm not, you know, raising a flag behind crowdfunding. I'm just saying that it goes to a data point that over the last 18 months has become part of our you know, vision, which is essentially that, you know, family offices are going to not only write us checks, but they're ready to compete with us. They've got the skill set, they're hiring in the people directly. You know, that's number one. Number two, there are alternatives like, you know, and I totally agree with you know, my colleagues. You got to be the right person to make it work, et cetera, et cetera. But the point that's interesting about that is the investors. And you know, as a venture fund, we've always been family office funded. We've never taken institutional capital as our LPs. You know, that was a really hard thing. You know, I remember when in 99, 2000, when we raised our first fund, there was a lot of time spent on jets going to countries where they don't speak English, right? And, you know, today it is incredibly different. You know, the family office level in the Bay Area alone, you know, is enough to support most of the venture world today. But what's interesting is when you see, you know, the return levels that individuals have had, and, you know, you're now seeing the ability of individuals, you know, that are based in Florida and Alabama and everywhere else in the country that are smart. They are incredibly well educated in the category. They're as or more passionate than we are. And they have the ability to write $50,000, $100,000 checks, you know, at their discretion to, you know, and to a startup, you know, that is something that's really, really interesting. Now, you know, when you get to the organized angel level, Angel Capital Association, you know, a little knowledge can be dangerous. You could spend years trying to extract money out of angel groups. So I'll give you that. I have lots of friends that live in that world and love that world. But the individual investor that's got passion, being able to reach them in one way or another is just surprisingly interesting. We're hearing from our companies incoming, Instagram messages saying, how do I give you money because I believe in this? And that isn't just, vegan burritos. That is, or, alternative proteins. That is into companies that, fight climate change. So I think to a large degree, when you're dealing with such a meaningful issue, the ability for founders to think broader is important. And us as VCs to just realize that, our peripheral vision has to be open before we get it disintermediated.
And just to also tie this, maybe even just explicitly tie it back to climate. I mean, to a certain extent, I think there's a pitch or a play to be made that like climate is consumer, right? Whether you're direct or indirect. And so depending upon what the technology is,
it's right, Jason,
it reaches.
It's really hard to get everybody super passionate about SaaS. You know what I'm saying? People aren't like banging their fists on the table in, Montgomery, Alabama going, man, this whole hard, SaaS model and ChatGPT, I got to get in there and move the needle. No, I mean, they're watching their, local river flood the banks and taking out, their most vulnerable aspect of their population, which is, it's ruining their lives, or, hurricanes and tropical storms are like blowing out their beach houses. And they're like, I got to do something. And so entrepreneurs giving them the ability to do that, I think is super important.
So I think most of the folks on this panel are actually focused a little bit more on the software side, but I would like to spend some time, Camila, I know that you're particularly focused on hardware. Like, where are some of the exciting technologies emerging, and what are you and your fund sort of excited about these days? What do you see on the horizon at Symbia?
So in terms of hardware, I would say material sciences is very interesting. I mean, because there's an actual product to sell, especially in the packaging or like directly to consumer technologies. That's a very exciting area. And as I mentioned before, energy infrastructure. So we're all into, there's a lot of infrastructure to be made, whereas it's in solar panels, in water, like there's a lot of wave technologies to extract energy. There's also wind. So a lot of energy infrastructure is what we're focused on right now, but I would say material sciences are on the boom to grow farther, considering the current ecosystem. So that's what I would mainly suggest. And also I think yes, like as you mentioned, it is hard for companies to get involved and passionate onto climate, but because of these new regulations, they're going to have to start to optimize certain processes. And in order to do that, we need a lot, not only hardware, so like new machinery that is better in handling sustainability or is more sustainable, it's constructed with better materials and so on, but also optimization programs in the industry. So we see a lot of, in terms of software, at least a lot of optimization programs and efficient programs that try to gather together all the information they can and optimize all of the processes so they are sustainable and they can cut carbon to emissions.
Also, there's not just the regulations that are pushing the companies, but to the point that climate affects the consumers and people don't like it when, the river in their town they then put pressure on the companies that they do business with. And there's pretty sound research I'm in the US, showing that, in Gen Z in particular will move their dollars from one company to another based on whether they perceive them as green. So, I mean, sure, there's a lot of greenwashing. But for us at Starshot, we're very interested in food waste. We're very interested in cement and steel. Like, if you look at the footprint of cement is 2.5 times the size of the airline industry. And it's not very sexy. I don't think the average person is, in the same way no one's excited about SaaS. I don't think people are very excited about, good cement. Well, we're very excited about better cement. And so I think there's a lot of stuff like that, especially because if you consider, half the people in the world do not currently live in what might be considered to be adequate housing. So there's just an enormous amount of cement is going to be poured in the next 30 years. And so these are markets that are just clearly going to expand, and often the more climate friendly option lasts longer and is ultimately cheaper and is superior in so many other ways. And so I think there's something very exciting about stuff like that. And then we have a wonderful company called Harvest Thermal who just won a nice big prize yesterday. That is, they work, they're killing the duck curve, working with your heat pump to turn your water tank into a battery, so you can have all the hot water and all the heat you could possibly want. And I love stuff like that. Like, it makes your home quieter and more comfortable and more pleasant, like to the point of, the dogs don't like going to a pet groomer who's got a diesel generator. I don't like going near a diesel generator. Like, it smells bad and it's loud and it's killing particulate pollution from the burning of fossil fuels. Kills about 8 million people globally every year, most of them in places where they're using wood burning stoves. But even in the US, that number is 100,000 a year from people living next to factories or living in near highways. So there's a huge, improving the built environment is something that is very near and dear to people. Like, if you have asthma and you live near a diesel generator all the time, you're going to notice, and you're going to want to spend money to fix that.
Yeah.
Steel is the other thing I wanted to mention. Find us some really good carbon-free steel.
Yeah, no, certainly. I just want to say SaaS. When I was talking SaaS, I meant like CRM, not like energy SaaS, by the way. So, people aren't banging their hands saying, we got to make Salesforce better, right? So that's what I meant.
Oh, no, they definitely want to make data centers run better, and they've got plenty of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many places, such a greenfield, so to speak. I mean, we're super stoked on portable power. I mean, we're all in on that. I mean, I think that's a big issue. It really kind of crosses from the emerging economy all the way into the current economy. I really look at in sort of a mobility dynamic. If you think about emerging economies that sort of never did landlines, they never did hard wires, everything is purely mobile. Those are the opportunities. I think, initially it's always going to be proved here. We had to get towers in the ground and have big auctions, and, everybody had to carry a mobile phone here in the United States, and certainly, most of the EU first. But the ability to get mobile power into these emerging countries is so important. We saw some great entrepreneurs doing great things with solar in emerging markets now, where they're moving to solar very quickly. Problem with solar is storing that solar, moving that solar. At the end of the day, they're still pouring, gas into a generator that is probably older than all of us combined, and it's super, super gross and scary. So yeah, that's a category we're super interested in. And then, we are very heads down on the ag side, as we always have been. Alternative protein fermentation ruling the world. And at the end of the day, you've got to get consumers across. Our company Alpha Foods now is at 14,000 locations across the North America and the EU. I just got a call from my buddy in Mexico who said he just bought one of their burritos at a local supermarket, and he wants to make a point that there clearly are no people from Latin America in the foods sort of kind of creation stage of that company, and that white people should not make burritos. So just letting you know that we have penetrated, and there are complaints, which means you've got saturation in a market.
I think from our side, on the software side, there's a few areas that we're interested. I think one that's really active right now is kind of software for utility scale renewables, especially solar. We saw the software kind of wedge start taking off after solar crossed 50 gigawatts-ish of total installed capacity back in 2012. Right now, it's about 50% of the startups that we're seeing are software in the solar space. And some portfolio companies like Terabase, they're using software to help improve efficiency in the design and deployment and construction of large-scale photovoltaic power plants. Folks like Raptor Maps, another portfolio company that's kind of doing lifecycle management software for solar industry. And then also around like grid modernization, it's a tough, utilities are notoriously tough, customers. They're the premium placed on, reliability and, delivering power to customers makes it challenging for small, innovators to sell to them. But, there's tons of pain point as the grid adapts to, massive interconnection of renewable generation, increased generation and load volatility, and more volatile climate. And then like FERC just released, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission just released an order, I think it's 2023, kind of around grid modernization. And so, things like streamlining the interconnection process, made an investment in Pearl Street that's providing kind of simulation, around interconnection process. Folks like Amperon managing grid volatility are, all areas of interest. But also seeing a lot of activity around like fleet electrification, seeing a lot of activity around electrification of the built environment, which is, pretty broad, but everything from residential, helping finance, the heat pumps, that Zoe was talking about, to getting better data for, HVAC assets to help, understand the, energy and, cost associated. Portfolio company specifics is doing that. So I think we're seeing a lot of opportunity kind of around the industry, but those are a few areas that are top of mind for us.
I'd love to talk just a little bit more about ag, because I feel like that's maybe one that doesn't necessarily get as much attention. There's agriculture is a 30% F, or what is the carbon emissions from?
It's massive. I'm not, every time I see a report, it gets bigger. So I'll try, never get quoted on something like that on my end, but yeah, no, it's tremendous. I mean, it's a huge problem. I mean, predominantly it's protein issues, right, on the ag side, but it's a broader issue, as in all aspects of climate, the first wave is always like a terrible, decimated, wasteland. The second wave is great. We're just kind of coming out of the first wave of, sort of indoor ag here, in sort of the North American world. Indoor ag was very popular for a long time. It was crushed, economics. I mean, Plenty here in town, for example, is just, filed for bankruptcy. But, in the rest of the world, and that was really originated in the Middle East and Israel, we're seeing all of the Mediterranean region realizing that they're going to have to go to some level of indoor ag, automated watering and, that kind of thing. I think that's spreading north in Europe very quickly. Here, farmers are huge innovators. I mean, I remember, being, an early investor in ag and, the early 2000s, walking out to a giant ranch and they've got barcodes on their cattle and it's going into an Oracle database. So farmers are not afraid of tech. I mean, you just have to make the economical case that it's there. It's a very, it's a lot like retail. It's a very, very thin margin, and a huge amount of risk. So you've got to really make a strong case to make it work. But protein is a great place to dig in. And I think even small reductions in protein are making a huge difference, especially if you can utilize, let's say, for example, a waste stream as your source material for protein creation.
As well as
actually,
protein. Sorry. Please go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. So actually, just talking about the protein issue in ag tech, I just met a company in Colombia like a couple of weeks ago, in which they're using cattle raised waste to actually produce a protein for animals, and it's already passing like all of the licensing, all of the government requirements, and so on. So these people are fairly innovators, and the funny part of this whole company is that none of them went to university. Like they just literally focused on jumping into working towards a solution because they saw they had too much waste, and they knew, as the people in this environment know, that this can be useful for something else. So I think if there's any entrepreneurs with us today, like, you can get creative and you don't need a lot of flashy diplomas to do it.
I think there's also you also, if you do have a lot of flashy diplomas, don't go and wave them at the farmers like the sort of coastal elite of the stereotype, because they're not going to buy from you or work with you. I grew up on a family farm, and the fact that I sort of speak some of that language reasonably well has proven to be shockingly useful, which is, well, I suppose in retrospect, not shocking at all, but it's very exciting to be like, stock-proof fencing. And they're like, you know what that is? It's right there in the name. But I think we should also think a lot about, 80% of the water that's used in places that are under serious water stress, like California and Australia, is used by farming. And those systems waste about 30% of what they're using. We cannot continue like that. And I don't mean in the sense of like, oh, guys, it's bad. I mean in the sense of like the crops will die. There's not enough water. So we literally cannot continue like that. We're going to have to get better at that. We're going to need fertigation, like where you're putting the fertilizer through drip irrigation. And that means there's going to be, there's all this really exciting stuff like mineral, which spun out of Google's Moonshot Factory, where they've got robots that can tell you sort of like can go and handle all the sort of stuff in the fields. There's also the fact that you know, a lot of people died over this summer in fields because they were out working when it was too hot. And so there's going to be some robot, you know, need for automation of certain types of jobs that also, especially there were also a lot of places where fruit was rotting because they were so anti-migrant that they wouldn't allow immigrants to come and pick the fruit, and they couldn't get the workers locally. So I think there's going to be a big market for automation in farming. And then there's also sequestering and advanced weatherization, advanced weathering, that kind of thing, which is kind of a win because you can put the carbon back into the soil and it also makes the yields higher the following cycle. And then, you know, on my own family farm, there is now a solar farm and there are sheep grazing underneath it. So also finding ways to put a couple of layers of use onto the land so you get a second revenue stream off the land. So there's, you know, those are not our sheep, someone's paying to put those sheep there. And you know, they like, there are a lot of plants like coffee that like being shade grown. So putting a solar panel on certain types of fields actually can improve the yields as well. And yeah, to the point that farmers are not afraid to innovate. Yeah, they had apps and they had barcodes, as you said, before a lot of like regular people living in Brooklyn had them. So they're definitely, and also they take a real pride in the fact that they think very long term and that they are thinking about how can I leave this land for my descendants in a way that honors how beautiful it is and how productive it is. And that's exactly the mindset you need for someone who's going to care about climate change. So let's not write them off as you know, hillbillies who are all in denial. They're actually some of the best allies we have.
Oh, well, the average small family independent farm in the United States is an $8 million a year business. So to anybody who is, you know, who has ever thought of what is a meaningful SMB market, think about with that, it's tremendous opportunity there. And what's interesting, and Camila stressed on this, is animal feed is a huge issue. Particularly, it's amazing, but in California, in our water-stressed environment, we grow millions and millions of tons of alfalfa for animals. One of the companies we're working with now does high-speed growth of animal feed in an incredibly tight area with power from solar, incredibly small, a limited amount of water use. I mean, literally, because the animals don't care how pretty it looks. They care about its nutritional value and whether it smells and tastes good to them. So, that's an easy win if you can get it. And, if you could show farmers great ROI, they're the first people in line to buy.
We've got a wonderful company in our portfolio, Ruminate, that's based down in Perth, Australia. And so everyone's very excited about the seaweed that cows can eat that makes them not burp all that methane that's doing so much damage. And let's be real, also people are like, oh, we should all give up beef. People are not going to all give up beef, at least not yet. So we've got to deal with it. Cows are here to stay for the time being. So let's make them our friends. And also they're super cute. But with Ruminate, we discovered, the cows don't like the seaweed that much, to the point that they won't eat something that they don't like. And you can't argue with them about it. So Ruminate took the bromoform, the active ingredient, put it in a bolus that lasts for a year, and you can have 6 months to a year. So you can have a cow that's on the range that you see it once a year. And the lovely thing about when they're not making the methane, it's because they are digesting their food more efficiently, which means they need less acreage or less food, which means you are spending less money to feed them. So you don't have to care about the methane to think that that is a nice big win.
Right, because the methane is not from the cow itself; it's from the bacteria in the digestive tract, right? That is processing.
The undigested
That's how they get there. Yeah. So that brings us to 1 o'clock. Thank you very much, panel. I'd like to maybe have each of you, if you have any thoughts you'd like to give the audience, to speak for about 30 seconds or a minute or so, if you want to share any closing thoughts with them. Maybe we'll start with you, Gabriel, if you have any, or if not, just your contact information, if you want to be contacted, would be helpful.
Yeah, I think the main thought is just it's a critical point in time right now to make moves on climate, and we need all the people involved in basically every capacity. You look at pretty much every niche within climate, and labor is one of the biggest issues associated with it. Everything from, financing energy projects to, actually installing the solar out in the field, all across the industry, just need more people. So really excited to, see the folks tuning in and interested in this space, building business in this space. And we just need more people doing exactly that. So keep on doing it.
Thank you. Camila?
Yes, so I encourage entrepreneurs to focus on climate tech for the time being, at least. And to think also that climate tech is not, it can be polarized politically in certain areas. So my advice would be focus on a solution to a different vertical with a climate tech solution, meaning you focus on providing energy, you focus on providing waste management, providing, and this as a consequence is a climate tech solution. So try to focus on not only the carbon accounting part of things, the carbon sequestration and all of these database reports that are coming out, because it's an unregulated market. And so far, and at this point, we need infrastructure, we need really in different, as Gabriel mentioned, in different verticals, in different industries, we need people to be tackling problems in a sustainable manner. So I encourage you guys to think it that way. And yeah, if you want to contact me, just add me on LinkedIn, Camila Orozco-Gil, and I'm happy to share my thoughts with you and also listen to your story.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I'm also find me on LinkedIn. I think the important thing to remember is that, to Gabriel's point, there is space for unicorns in every vertical of climate, whole herds of them rampaging across the land. And so also the kind of person who comes into climate, climate is not yet mature enough as a sort of field that people are here just for the money. They're here because they believe in it, and because we all realize that your success is our success, is each other's success, because at the end of the day, if everybody else in this room is wildly successful, I get a habitable planet at the end of it. And I'm really into having one of those. So it's okay to ask for help. You're in a uniquely great community of people who actually want to see each other succeed. And so rather than, you know, that obviously you have competitors, but you also have an awful lot of friends. So like, don't be afraid to reach out to people and you know, rely on the fact that we are actually all on the same side, even if we do compete.
Thank you. And F, any parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, so I'll echo what all of my colleagues said. I mean, especially what Camila was talking about in terms of how you deliver the product line. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, this really has to be a real business. You know, we are not in the venture side, nonprofit organizations, funding, you know, at like a foundation kind of level, right? So entrepreneurs in this category have to use all the same metrics that a technology startup would. You know, you have to have the right growth perspective. We have to have the right, you know, exit trajectory. You have to have the right valuation exit trajectory, or it doesn't work for us, because our investors, and everybody has to understand, we have investors in us, and then therefore we have to, you know, deliver returns there. So it's really important that everybody in the cycle here, you know, understands that. And, you know, there are a lot of alternative fundings, but if venture is the way to go, make sure as an entrepreneur you align to our, you know, requirements in the category.
Very sound advice. Thank you, Ab. Thank you, panel. So at this point, we're going to take questions. If you're an audience member and you have a question, please use the Q&A function. We'll take a look at those and try to select questions that are of general applicability. And please don't share any confidential information with us. So maybe we'll start a little bit. We haven't talked about the circular economy at all. Maybe we can start there and be interested in, you know, whether either, if any of you participate and have investments in companies that are in the circular economy, or, you know, if you have any thoughts and if you're seeing any activity with respect to the companies that participate in that space.
Yeah, my team, I'll jump on that if that's all right. My team at Google, that when I was there, actually created Google's first circular economy accelerator, which just had its demo day last week for the first cohort. So this is certainly near and dear. Our VP there, he went on a rowing holiday from Hawaii he was rowing from Hawaii to San Francisco, and he rowed through the Pacific garbage patch and then cried for a week because it was so horrific. And I think the circular economy is something that I don't think it has come of age as a concept that people fully wrap their heads around. Like at the moment, people still think of recycling as a kind of a bit of a crunchy thing to do, and they don't quite know the difference between like downcycling and upcycling and that sort of thing. But there is a massive amount of pressure. Like we have a company that does a lot of business with the apparel sector, and fast fashion is coming under a huge amount of pressure. There's all of this sort of, I think there's a move away from the post-war generations of you know, the idea that new is good and that you want something and then you throw it away and you get another one the next year. And there's a lot more of a sort of movement culturally towards what if you get something that lasts, and visible mending, where like you get a little stain and instead of throwing it away, you put like a little flower over it or something, and then show off about it. So we're definitely seeing a cultural move. And also there's just a huge amount of money and a huge amount of data to be which it can, you know, can be turned into money in the circular economy. Like throwing away copper like we're doing is totally bonkers. But even, you know, throwing away stuff in the way that we've been doing, you can stay in a dialogue with your customer much more effectively if you're getting the materials back in some way, or if there are other, if the ecosystem is a loop rather than a line. So I think, yeah, absolutely. If anyone's got an amazing circular economy business, I definitely want to see it.
For me, at least, I've seen in the construction ecosystem area, especially from the suppliers, that there's a lot of peer-to-peer kind of like softwares that can enable this exchange of circular economy and keep kind of like their materials going. And also they're implementing the licensing model, at least I saw a startup from Tel Aviv actually that is trying to license the wood of certain houses like directly for the residents or whoever owns the property, and they take the wood for 50 years later and then they replace it with new wood, and therefore they can use this wood for something different. So like they're kind of like upcycling this wood while at the same time maintaining their clients, so also having this profitability and like what Zoe was talking about. So I think there's a lot of creative ways that to also make it even a company even more profitable and like more loyal to the consumer and to the company overall. So there's a lot of things going on in circular economy.
I love that business model. I'm going to jump back in here because there's a delightful thing. So at Oxford University, they had to redo the roof of one of the colleges, so like the sub colleges within the university, that to redo the roof of their chapel and their great hall, which if you've seen Harry Potter, you've seen this room. And that building was first built 650 something years ago. And when they built it, they were given a grove of trees by the king, and they cut down those trees and turned them into the roof. And then they planted more trees and redid the roof around the year 1700. And then they just redid it again with the same trees from the same grove. Like that's what the circular economy can do. Just that quick.
Cool.
It's a very different mindset than just, you know, new is better always. Camila, I think earlier when we were reaching back in our conversation to when we were talking about crowdfunding, you mentioned basically, you know, not crowds in terms of like individual consumer investors, but there are other sort of strategics and other folks who play like in the space. So open question for the panel. What sort of activity have you seen by sort of existing energy companies in supporting alternative energy and also, you know, initiatives? I mean, I've seen a lot of interest by existing energy companies in the space and a lot of investments, but what are you seeing in that space and what do you make of it, you know, for your portfolio companies? Is it something good to have those folks on board or not good?
Definitely. I'll jump right in into answering this. So one of our portfolio companies actually does the infrastructure for windmill towers made out of wood in a modular way. And they were one of their main investors is Vestas Ventures, which is a Scandinavian energy company. And of course, the strategy they tried to tackle into this company was because they also want to market it in a way that, okay, not only we're providing energy and it is sustainable, we're also having the infrastructure in a sustainable manner. And I have to say that at the beginning, I was, as an investor, of course, hesitant to have like an energy company so involved in the process. However, it has made the company it is today, which is Modvion. So they have helped them a lot with expertise. They have helped them a lot with potential clients besides Vestas or potential suppliers besides Vestas. So I think it's always good to have a corporate on your cap table that can help you grow faster. However, also with cautious, like you'll also need to be clear on what you want to do and like what is your prospect if you want to have this company or if you want to sell it, or, you know, you have to be very clear early on what is the strategy of the company in order to pursue it.
I would raise two. I would agree that that's, yeah, you're a big corporate with a bottomless pit of money is a lovely thing to have involved. I would raise two amber flags and a green one. The amber flags are that having a certain, I know one company I've been speaking with recently has the venture fund of one of the big oil majors involved already, and it has caused a lot of friction. Like there are universities that don't want to work with them because they're like, oh, you're doing business with Satan. So that's something to maybe be worried about. And then there's also, I've seen a couple of times where there's people within those companies who are great people who like want to make the pivot and they're there to like fix the system from the inside. And I have a lot of respect for that. But if one of them says, oh, they're interested in your company and then they leave, the next person after them may not have the clout or may not be as interested in the same way because they're going against the grain somewhat. But the green flag is that everybody wants to be Netflix and not Blockbuster, and they're aware that the pivot is happening and that there are good people working at these companies who really are determined to make it change.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, energy companies are some of the largest and frankly most powerful and profitable in the world. So inevitably, they make their way into pretty much all aspects of the financial world. We've even seen, second and third level investments that they've got their own venture funds. Those venture funds are like by default LPs and other venture funds. So I think, our perspective is just, look, great companies, if it should, will get funded, right? I think the energy companies investing in the category, they're looking for, they want to be on the cutting edge of what could be replacing them, and they want to buy it, own it, and roll it out first. So, that works with our ecosystem, and and I think the more we can bring great companies to all the parties, the better.
I think it's interesting to see, talking about large energy companies like oil and gas, for instance. I think there's a variety of approaches that you see. I think you see some that are taking more of like a, core business and dividends approach, which can make some, economic sense, but is, from a climate perspective, a bit more challenging. I think you have folks like, Ørsted. I think they used to be Danish oil and gas, and now they're the largest offshore wind, company, and they're a huge driver of innovation around the industry. And, their business is, like, I believe north of 90%, renewables now, and it's totally transitioned. So I think in those cases, there's a huge kind of innovation drive, for companies that are like, focusing on changing their business like that. But I think, echoing, Zoe's point, we definitely spend a lot of time thinking about, strategics on, cap tables for startups that we invest in. I think oftentimes it's a huge benefit, and it can provide, preferential, access to like large markets, and that's great. But I think we get cautious, when we see it going over, a quarter, or like, when it starts to become a large share, or if the industry is like very competitive, and like, if you're very competitive, very consolidated, if you have one, corporate, that's on the cap table, other folks are going to be, worried about, information rights and, leakage of information. You might have a hard time selling to, their competitors. And if it's a consolidated industry, that might blow up your, potential market size. So I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of like variables to be thinking through, but I think there can be a lot of pros, but also some cons and ways to think about those dynamics if you're looking at an investor of that profile.
The sort of traditional advice, if you're trying to get the most bang for your buck and you're trying to keep your options open, is you'd have a traditional fund lead the round, because theoretically they're aligned in terms of getting a great exit, whether that's an IPO exit or an M&A exit. And so you kind of get maybe the additional dry powder coming in from the strategic, as well as maybe those opportunities and the doors opening. But that may not be correct for your company situation. But that's sort of the traditional advice that I see. In terms of, earlier we spoke a little bit about opportunities in material science and climate. It'd be great to talk a little bit more. And actually, with Zoe, when you were talking about concrete, I actually got interested in concrete because I was curious, are you, is the concern on the energy side, or is it a concern on the sand side? Because I've heard,
yes.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so interested in. Sorry, two of my colleagues just went to this massive mine to see where, like, it was an iron mine, and which it's tangentially related, but it was just like amazing to see the sort of scale that these things are happening on. It was 15 square miles and it had no humans down in the pit. It was these massive trucks moving at 60 kilometers an hour that are like trucks that had like practically an apartment size floor. Anyway, it's just, yeah, I'm really excited about this now. But like, so basically with cement, for example, 2/3 of the problem is the energy. If you could make that energy green, but you'd still then be left with about 2.5% of the total climate problem that, you know, like roughly commensurate with the entire airline industry would be left in the fact that cement requires limestone. So the problem with limestone is it's everywhere and it's cheap. So nobody's going to switch away from it unless you have something that's even more everywhere and even more cheap. And so there are a few candidates for that. That various companies out there are looking at, but it's, you know, no one has completely cracked that nut. But yeah, we're gonna. What I am a little cynical about is when people talk about how they've got a carbon-eating concrete or a carbon-eating cement, because all cement eats carbon a little bit, and so it's not clear if there's actually any additionality to that compared to just leaving it standing there for 10 years and it will do it quietly on its own. So yeah, that's an interesting question, but. I think cement's very interesting to me, and also asphalt, because there's just an awful lot of it, especially in the US. I think I remember reading that the surface of Los Angeles is something like 14% parking spots, which is bad urban design, and it shouldn't be like that. But also we're going to need to be recycling a lot more of asphalt, and we're also going to need to be making our cities spongier so that they can sort of absorb more flood waters and not get so hot. So we're going to need to sort of fundamentally redesign the materials that we put down, because blacktop, if the day is 100 degrees, can be like 125, 130 degrees, and that will burn your pores if you're a dog. And like if you sit down, like everybody saw right in Phoenix over the summer, people like poor god awful situation where homeless people like would lie down to sleep and burn on. And so we need some materials that aren't going to allow that kind of thing to happen as well.
So I think maybe we missed this question at the outset. I apologize for not asking it, but in terms of geography of investments so that you'll take a look at, I think it might be helpful to just go around the horn and say, you know, I know most of us are here in the Bay Area, except for Gabriel, but I know his fund is international, or Powerhouse Ventures is international. So but talk a little bit about, because we have viewers from all over the world, talking about, you know, what geographies are you looking at or open to?
Yeah, so we have a global mandate. We primarily invest in North America just as a function of, you know, where we sit and are most familiar. So US and Canada primarily, but we have a few investments in Europe, both UK and EU, a couple investments in Africa. You know, we'll look at companies in LATAM and APAC. We haven't made any investments yet, but we do take a broad view.
F?
Yeah, so I mean, we're primarily based, you know, focused on North America. We had an office in Israel for many years in the 2000s, but you know, there's so much great capital out there. You know, we feel that, you know, it's tough enough to just capture our own zone. Now, you know, we're not precluded from investing overseas, but I think it's really where our network and value could be. So, you know, we are in deals overseas, but that's mostly because board members or friends that are on the venture side, you know, like I joke, you know, venture is a club sport, right? So, you know, you need to at some point invest in your friends' deals, even if they're in far-flung places.
So we have, well, I'm kind of our man in Europe for now. So I'm in the UK a fair amount of the time. I'm trying to, you know, fly less. So I'm trying to do like fewer, longer trips. But I was just in Exeter in the UK, which is like probably a third tier city there, seeing a company that I think could be really amazing first tier company. I'm speaking to a company in India later today. Well, no, when it's the morning their time, so a lot later today. And we've got we're chatting to folks in Brazil. So like we'll go where the genius is, and you know, ruminate, like I mentioned, there in Australia. I also just think it's really important that people who look and sound like me are sending capital to places like India and Indonesia and places like that, because you know, we kind of caused the climate problem a lot more than they did, and there's a lot of really, they're on the sharp end of what it's going to be like to live with it. And so they are of necessity, you know, having a lot of the best ideas about how to live in a more hot and erratic world, and also how to stop it from happening. So I have certain standing meetings with folks in India, and we're certainly looking for opportunities there.
Camila, I'm sorry, you gotta unmute. Thanks.
Oh, again, sorry. So Symbia VC is based in Europe, and therefore we invest mainly in Europe. I would say 70% or 60 to 70%, and the rest global reach. We have even looked into Latin American companies, American companies overall. So there's always a space. And for my future endeavors, which I should say that I'm leaving Symbia soon. The next company I will be helping would be on a global reach. So I think all things climate, as Zoe said, it's important to help underdeveloped countries because they are the ones that actually can tackle these problems the most, I would say, and can tackle them in like, because there's so much population over there and growth and development, they are the ones that can actually help us recreate that in our countries here. So I think, yeah, we should have a global reach about this topic.
Thank you. And I guess for those viewers who are watching, who, I don't know, maybe are looking to become more involved in the space, are there, what resources could they check out aside from obviously, this panel and sort of other similar panels, but where else is like a great way to sort of learn more and potentially get involved?
So I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is to work on climate. Full disclosure, I am not officially working with them, but I have done in the past. And Work on Climate is a 25,000 person community for people looking to get involved in climate and is very well run. And you'll probably find that there are meetups somewhere useful to you. And the other entity I suggest is if you're not happy with your climate knowledge, like you don't feel you have a really good sort of mental pie chart of the problems and the solutions, then obviously Project Drawdown is a particularly great resource for getting like that, just good visibility. And then the TerraDo climate course, I highly recommend. And I will put that link as well. This is, and I don't want to sit here and tell people to spend oodles of money because it's not cheap, but it's a really, like it's a cohort group. So you'll get to know people and you'll learn a lot as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Gabriel?
Yeah, definitely echo the great recommendations, Zoe. A couple other ones. I think MCJ, My Climate Journey, has some good communities. Climate Base has a lot of interesting job opportunities if you're looking. Plug for Powerhouse Ventures portfolio companies. Our website has a list of folks that we've invested in that are hiring. I think CTVC is a great, Climate Tech Venture Capital is a great newsletter to kind of get some overview of the space. And also, depending on the kind of community that you live in, a lot of municipalities are doing a lot of organizing and initiatives around climate. Living in Ann Arbor, I think they're a bit at the tip of the spear, but has a really great sustainability office, a lot of kind of citizen panels and events, activities, things like that you can kind of meet up with people that are close to you and build community around as well too, that I don't think gets as much attention in a lot of circles.
So I guess actually I've got, this question came up. I did not ask it. It's Anonymous, who's one of my favorite attendees. But in terms of like deal flow for you all, I mean, to what extent are you engaged in, outbound versus inbound? I'm always kind of curious to see what the panelists, how they operate their funds and how they get their deal flow.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in on that one. I would say the bulk of our deal flow is often VC to VC, but I would say service provider to us, right? So, as I always say, the first thing you need to do in Hunter S. Thompson fashion is get yourself a good lawyer. If you get yourself the right lawyer, he will introduce you or she will introduce you to people like us. Jason is a great lawyer who happens to know all of us. So, take that under advisement. And then that cycles down through the accountants and the CFOs and all the other categories. Certainly incubators, accelerators, networkers, people like Rob, who see tons and meet tons of people, send us deals. So, that is, I think, our first filter level, deals that are coming in from people we know and like, deals that are coming in from other VCs. Most of our deals get done today on a VC to VC basis. However, we get a ton of deal flow. We get, 3,000 deals in the front door through our websites and other mechanisms per year. Someone on my team, whether it be an analyst or an intern, goes through all of them pretty much. And, while you can't be guaranteed like any kind of response or critique or anything like that, just know that someone's reading it and it is worth getting it out the door to us.
Yeah, the worst thing we can say is no, right? Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
It's okay. But to Ephraim's point, like from our perspective, at least in the last 2 venture capitals I have been in, it has always been peer-to-peer. So like venture capitalist to venture capitalist, the ones that really reach the deal. But the reason for this is because we send each other a lot of the deal. So even if it's not our kind of like our sweet spot or our vertical or so. So don't feel discouraged if someone tells you no, because they might, as Ephraim said, they might open the door by telling anyone else. So just get out there and talk to people. Maybe they know someone that knows someone that knows someone. And that way you can get into the door.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a wasted audition. So for us, as well as the sources that have been mentioned, there's like accelerators and conferences. And then also like the Google and Tesla alumni circles. And, we do all know each other. So we do get an awful lot of, if you think about a company like Google, like with 10% turnover a year, 20,000 Googlers leave and 10% of that group starts a company. Even if only 100 of them are like in the relevant space and high quality, which they're quite likely to be because they're former Googlers, just that can produce an awful lot of incoming. So yeah, we don't have to do a lot of outbound. We haven't really needed to do that.
Yeah, definitely agree with all the sources that have been mentioned. One other one that I don't think was mentioned is like tech transfer offices from universities. I think is also interesting source, especially folks have gotten a lot of non-dilutive funding. Similarly, most of ours is inbound. We'll periodically do some outbound as well too. But just reiterating all the avenues that were mentioned.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time. I want to thank the attendees for attending either live or asynchronously. I want to thank Rob Lau and Idea to IPO for organizing today's event. Obviously, my firm for helping to put it together and sponsoring it. Obviously, each and every one of our panelists, Camila, Gabriel, Zoe, F. Thank you. Thank you for the Hunter S. Thompson reference. I'm not like Raul Duke. I'm a little bit more.
Hey, man, you're cool, Jason. You're way cooler than you're letting
I'm cool, but I'm a little bit more buttoned up than that guy in Fear and Loathing. Just for those who are in the audience. But anyway, really appreciate it. I'm going to let you all get back to your board meetings and other activities. And I want to let all of the entrepreneurs get back to building their great companies. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jason.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.